My name is Alex and I'm one of 4 friends who decided to go camping in the woods this weekend. I was excited to get out of town and enjoy the fresh air with my best friends, Jake, Tyler, and Ben. But once we got to the forest, something felt wrong. The environment was eerily silent, with few animals making any noise. The tall, dense trees blocked out the sunlight, creating eerie shadows on the ground. As we walked along the trail, we noticed a macabre crow watching us. It followed us for a few minutes, flying from tree to tree. Before disappearing, Jake suggested that we set up camp as soon as possible so we could explore the area and find a good place to fish. Tyler and Ben nodded and started unloading the backpacks. As I helped set up the tents, I couldn't help but feel a bad feeling in the back of my mind. Something about that forest made me uncomfortable, but I couldn't put my finger on what. Finally, camp was set up and we decided to go explore the area. We walked along a narrow path, surrounded by tall, dense trees. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the sound of dry leaves under our feet. Suddenly, we heard a loud noise, as if something had broken. Our first thought was of a falling branch, but the forest was completely calm. Tyler suggested we should investigate and see what it was, but Jake wasn't interested. He said he didn't want to get us in trouble and that we should go back to camp. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong and decided to go it alone to find out what was causing the noise. I walked slowly, looking for what could have made the noise. As I approached a clearing, I saw a tall dark figure standing in the middle of it. I couldn't see the figure's face, but something about it made me afraid. I started to slowly back away, but as soon as my back was turned, the figure started to move towards me. I ran as fast as I could, back to camp. When I arrived, I told my friends what I saw, but they just laughed and said it was just my imagination. But I knew what I'd seen and I couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister was watching us in those woods. Jake said he was going to take a quick nap, and meanwhile, Tyler, Ben and I had just finished our campfire and were sitting in our camp chairs drinking beer and talking. But that all changed when Jake started screaming. We jumped out of our chairs, confused and worried about what was going on. Jake was writhing in his sleeping bag. He looked like he was having a terrible nightmare. His screams echoed through the forest, and I could feel my own heart beating faster and faster. When we finally managed to wake him up, he was sweating and panting, unable to articulate what had happened. We were all worried, but we tried to calm him down and convince him that everything would be fine. Meanwhile, Ben and Tyler searched around the tent and discovered some strange markings. They appeared to be sharp claws, like those of a wild animal, but we couldn't say for sure. When I broke away from the group to go take a piss, as I walked through the forest, I noticed something black among the dry leaves. It was a crow's feather. I felt a chill run down my spine as I remembered the crow from earlier. When I got back to camp, I told my friends what I had found. We were all apprehensive and worried. Something strange was happening in that forest, and we didn't know what to do. The next day, we tried to ignore the incident and enjoy our trip. We went swimming in the river, hiked in the woods, and tried fishing in the lake. But there was something different in the air, something heavy and menacing. I could feel that my friends were nervous too, even though no one wanted to admit it. At night, when we were sitting around the fire, we heard a howl. It looked like a wolf, but it was taller and closer. Tyler suggested that maybe it was just a wild dog, but no one believed him. We were all tense and nervous, waiting for the next incident, and we don't have to wait long. In the middle of the night, I woke up to a loud sound coming from outside the tent. It felt like heavy breathing, something big and scary. I was frozen with fear, barely daring to breathe. Suddenly I heard scratching on the tent wall, as if something was trying to get in. I jumped out of my bag. My friends and I felt more and more cornered by the forest, and with each strange sound we heard, our hearts accelerated. It was like something was watching us, lurking around every corner, and the longer we spent there, the stronger that feeling became. One day, we decided that we needed to explore the forest to try to understand what was going on. It was there that we found a macabre crow, with black and shining eyes, that seemed to be always watching us. It was as if he knew what was going on and wanted to let us know something, but what did he mean? Things got worse when we found a big obstacle in front of us. A huge fallen tree blocked our way, and there was no way around it. It was as if the forest was trying to stop us from going on, as if we didn't want to find out what lay beyond that natural barrier. Jake was even more disturbed, and the fear on his face was palpable. Tyler and Ben tried to calm him down, but I knew something was wrong. It was as if the forest was closing in around us, keeping us trapped there forever. I started to get more and more paranoid, always looking over my shoulder, always imagining something was about to happen, and I knew the ghoulish crow was involved in all of that. He seemed to be watching us the entire time, as if he was guiding us towards something. The tension was palpable, and the fear surrounding us was almost unbearable. We knew something was wrong in that forest, something we couldn't explain, and yet, we couldn't leave. The forest held us captive, as if it were waiting for something terrible. Out of nowhere, Jake would start running and screaming very loudly. We ran towards him, but when we got to his tent, he was gone. We searched for him for hours, but found no leads. We started to wonder what we could have attracted with it. Did he get lost in the woods, or was he attacked by some wild animal? While looking for Jake, we found his tent torn apart and empty. We were stunned, not knowing what to think. That's when we found the letter written in blood. We froze, trying to process what was written. It was a direct threat, and the blood indicated that something terrible had sought Jake. That night was the most terrifying of all. We tried to stay awake to keep an eye on the area. Jake appeared, but he wasn't the same person we knew before. He looked traumatized, his breathing labored and eyes wide as if he'd seen something horrible. He was shaking non-stop, and I could feel the claw marks on his face as he carried him on his back. We ran as fast as we could, feeling the presence of the macabre crow following us closely. His piercing screams echoed in the forest, making my heart beat faster. I couldn't help but feel that we were being led into a final showdown. Finally, we reach a clearing and are faced with the ghoulish crow. He seemed to be protecting something, and I could feel it was something very important. The bird was enormous in size, like a bird of prey, and its claws were so sharp that they could easily tear apart anything that got in its way. We started running again, but the ghoulish crow seemed to be everywhere, always one step ahead of us. Every time I looked back, he was closer. I knew it was a matter of time before he caught up with us. The strange sound he made, like a macabre laugh, only increased my anxiety. When we finally found a way out of the forest, something hit us from behind. The ghoulish raven had reached us, and I could feel its sharp claws ripping into my back. My blood ran cold as I tried to wriggle away from him. But it was no use. He was too strong. It was then that something incredible happened. The macabre crow was repelled by a strong, blinding light that appeared out of nowhere. He screamed in pain and flew away, leaving us free to escape. We took the opportunity to escape the forest. After escaping the forest and finding Jake, we were shaken and confused. We didn't know what had happened to him or why the macabre crow seemed to be following us. When we tried to explain what happened to the local police station, the deputy seemed skeptical of our story, which made us even more frustrated and worried. On the way back home, I began to notice that the macabre crow's laugh sounded very real, almost human. It was then that the feeling that he was still watching me began to overwhelm me. I couldn't get the image of the crow out of my head, and I started to feel like it was always there, following me everywhere. To try to understand more about crow behavior, I called a friend who specializes in birds. It was then that he told me that crows are known to have long-term memories and that they can recognize and remember human faces. This idea terrified me, and I began to feel that I could never feel safe again. Now, every time someone looks at me on the street, I feel like there's a crow above them, hovering over them. I can no longer trust anyone, and paranoia has taken over. I can't sleep more than an hour a day, always waking up with the feeling that something is watching me. I have been in this degrading situation for 8 years now. This experience changed my life forever, and I believe I will never be able to fully get over it. The macabre crow may have disappeared from my life, but its presence will never leave my mind, ever present and terrifying.